The storm raged outside, a cacophony of thunder and lightning punctuating the relentless downpour. The Hargrove family, a father, mother, and their teenage daughter, were desperate for shelter. Their car had broken down miles from the nearest town, leaving them stranded in the middle of nowhere. In their frantic search for refuge, they stumbled upon an old, abandoned hospital. Its silhouette loomed against the night sky, an ominous fortress against the elements. "There's no other choice," Mark Hargrove said, his voice barely audible over the wind. He ushered his wife, Anne, and their daughter, Emily, through the rusted gates. The hospital's facade was cracked and weathered, ivy creeping up its stone walls like grasping fingers. As they entered the building, the heavy wooden doors groaned in protest. The interior was cloaked in darkness, the air thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Mark flicked on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom to reveal a reception desk covered in dust. Faded posters and broken furniture lay scattered, remnants of a place long forgotten. "Let's find a room where we can wait out the storm," Anne suggested, her voice trembling. Emily clung to her, eyes wide with fear. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors, their footsteps echoing eerily. The hospital seemed to close in around them, the walls whispering secrets of its past. Mark led them to a small room that once served as an office. They settled in, trying to make themselves comfortable on the cold, hard floor. "It's just for one night," Mark reassured his family, though he could feel the unease gnawing at him. They huddled together, the wind howling outside like a mournful wail. As the hours dragged on, Emily began to feel a presence in the room. She heard faint whispers, indistinct murmurs that seemed to come from the very walls. She tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to her imagination. But then she saw it. A shadowy figure standing in the doorway, watching them. "Dad," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. "There's someone here." Mark turned, his flashlight beam sweeping the room, but there was nothing there. "It's just the storm playing tricks on you, sweetie," he said, though his own heart was pounding. But Emily knew what she had seen. The figure had been real, its eyes dark and hollow, filled with a malice that chilled her to the bone. As the night wore on, the Hargroves were plagued by strange occurrences. Objects moved on their own, unseen hands brushed against them, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Mark tried to keep calm, but the atmosphere was suffocating, a palpable sense of dread hanging over them. Anne was the first to see the ghosts clearly. She had wandered into what appeared to be an old treatment room, drawn by a faint light. As she entered, she saw them. Patients in tattered hospital gowns, their faces gaunt and eyes vacant. They moved in jerky, unnatural motions, as if caught between life and death. "Mark!" Anne screamed, stumbling back. The ghosts turned to her, their expressions twisting into grotesque masks of rage. They began to advance, their movements slow but deliberate. Mark and Emily rushed to Anne's side, and together they fled down the corridor, the ghosts in pursuit. The hospital seemed to come alive, doors slamming shut and lights flickering wildly. The building itself was a maze, and every turn brought them face to face with more apparitions. Desperation set in as the family realized they were trapped. The ghosts were relentless, driven by a hunger for vengeance. Mark recalled the rumors he had heard about the hospital, a place where unspeakable experiments were conducted on the patients. The spirits of those who died in agony were now seeking retribution. They found themselves in a large, dilapidated ward. Rows of rusted beds lined the walls, and the air was thick with the smell of rot. The ghosts closed in, their whispers rising to a fever pitch. Emily clung to her parents, her eyes wide with terror. "This way," Mark shouted, spotting a door at the far end of the ward. They ran, their hearts pounding, but the door wouldn't budge. It was as if the hospital itself was conspiring to keep them there. The ghosts surrounded them, their eyes burning with an unholy light. Mark tried to shield his family, but he knew it was futile. The spirits reached out with skeletal hands, their touch icy and painful. Anne screamed as one of the ghosts grabbed her, its grip tightening like a vice. Emily felt a surge of anger and fear. She grabbed a piece of broken glass from the floor and slashed at the ghost, holding her mother. To her surprise, the spirit recoiled, its form flickering. "They can be hurt," she shouted. Mark and Anne followed Emily's lead, using whatever they could find to fight back. The ghosts howled in fury, their forms wavering under the assault. But the Hargroves were outnumbered, and the spirits were relentless. Just when it seemed they would be overwhelmed, a brilliant light filled the ward. The ghosts shrieked and retreated, vanishing into the shadows. The light came from an old lantern held by an elderly man who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere. "Follow me," he said, his voice calm and steady. The Hargroves hesitated, but the man's presence was reassuring. They followed him through the winding corridors until they reached a hidden exit. "Who are you?" Mark asked as they stepped out into the storm. "A guardian," the man replied. "This place is cursed, and those who enter rarely leave. But you must go now, and never return." The Hargroves didn't need to be told twice. They ran to the safety of the forest, the hospital disappearing into the night behind them. As they reached the main road, they heard a final mournful wail from the direction of the building. They never spoke of that night again, but the memories lingered, haunting their dreams. The hospital stood as a grim reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows, waiting for the next unsuspecting victims to stumble into their clutches.